Yes, it's time for that octogenarian fight that nobody wants or needs, but we're going to get anyway. And it's brought to you by the new movie from the Democratic National Committee, Weekend at Biden's. He may have dementia, but he's still the life of our party. At ringside for this contest are our judges, Tom Perez, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer. And this fight will be scored on the unified rules of the DNC, which are made up as they go along. And that means, Bernie, you are screwed. I'm Andrew Coppens, and you're tuned into, whoa, holy smokes, folks, that ended quickly. I didn't even see Joe Biden throw a single punch. And the ref has put a stop to the fight? Wait, the ref is wearing a Biden 2020 shirt. Oh my God, has this thing been rigged from the start? Welcome into the race for the Democratic nomination as it stands after Super Tuesday. And most importantly, welcome in to Critical Thinking, your show with the most numbers right here on Mojo 50 Radio. I'm your host, Andrew Coppens. Follow me on the Twitters, on the Facebooks, on whatever social media you are on at The Coppens Show. If you're new and you're watching for the first time, thank you. If you're listening for the first time live at 5 p.m. Central Time on your Saturday afternoon, thank you so much for tuning in. You can spell my last name, Coppens, Coppens. It's really, really that simple, folks. And of course, do not forget to hit up the YouTube page, youtube.com/Andrew Coppens, youtube.com/Andrew Coppens. All of it really, really simple for you. So whatever are we going to be talking about this week? Well, I've got all your Super Tuesday breakdown, including how the hell that thing happened on Tuesday, the fallout from those results, all the numbers you could possibly handle, because while everybody is talking about their opinions and all of that sort of stuff, very few people are breaking down the inside numbers. And, well, we're also going to tell you about an ex-Illinois GOP congressman coming out as gay and the LGBT lobby going after him. We'll play some Babylon Bee or Real News. It might also be time to hold Trump's feet to the fire fiscally. But before we get into the meat of the show, you know what goes well with a Saturday late afternoon? No, not your favorite beer or cocktail, but the pick-me-up of a good cup of coffee. I know, folks, when you hit that wall, you hit that wall. A great cup of Joe from American Pride Roasters, they have you covered. The official coffee of Mojo 50 Radio, AmericanPrideRoasters.com, at APR Coffee on Twitter. If you want to follow them, trust me, you're going to want this historically great coffee. May I suggest take a second? Okay, get yourself some of that coffee. Again, AmericanPrideRoasters.com. If you missed it last weekend, you missed Watson Prinier's wonderful white chocolate coffee. All sorts of goodness from APR this month. And boy, oh boy, do they have a lot coming down the pipeline. But let's go ahead and get back into the show, because you know what time it is. It's time for This Week in Socialism Sucks.
Here I was, sitting in Los Angeles in my beautiful office of my own late-night talk show. Soon I would be driving my hybrid car to my beautiful home to kiss my two beautiful and healthy children and my husband who had taken the year off to parent so I could focus on my career. And I have all of this, all of it, because I was allowed bodily autonomy at 15. I will not be shamed into being quiet. We will not be shamed into being quiet. Never again. I will never stop talking about my abortion or my periods or my experiences in childbirth, my episiotomies, my yeast infections, or my ovulation that lines up with the moon. And we have two alleged sexual predators on the bench of the highest court of the land with the power to determine our reproductive freedoms. I still believe, Anita Hill, and I still believe Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. So yes, I am outraged because this is outrageous. Let us channel our righteous rage into voting power, the power to evict the occupant of this White House, to legislate our destiny, to affirm our collective liberation. I stand ready as a partner in this battle to protect the will of the people and ensure every person has the right to self-determination over their reproductive health. The people united will never be defeated.
He chose Vice President Pence. Is it safe to assume that you do not think that's the best of his options?
No.
Yeah.
I think that we should have a person who believes in science.
Sure, that sounds good.
Ideally, what we have is a person who believes in universal health care and paid sick leave and an agenda that can help prevent the transmission of disease.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
But you see it as a possibility if he wants to spend $1 billion beating this guy, he could do it.
Absolutely. Somebody tweeted recently that actually with the money he spent, he could have given every American $1 million.
I've got it. Let's put it up on the screen. When I read it tonight on social media, it kind of all became clear. Bloomberg spent $500 million on ads. U.S. population 327 million. Don't tell us if you're ahead of us on the math. He could have given each American $1 million and have had lunch money left over. It's an incredible way of putting it.
It's an incredible way of putting it. It's true. It's disturbing. It does suggest, what we're talking about here, which is there's too much money in politics, and it makes it difficult because what we want in politics.
All right, folks, so let's go ahead and start with that AOC clip that we played here because nothing makes me more perturbed than this kind of thinking. So let me get this straight. The only people who could possibly handle an epidemic or a pandemic or whatever you want to label what's going on with the coronavirus is that you have to believe in universal healthcare. The belief in universal healthcare has to be the only way that you're qualified to handle this? Are you nuts? And furthermore, your want to make political hay out of a potential pandemic is grotesque at best. I want to ask a very simple question of each and every one of you. When the swine flu happened, when Ebola broke out, during the Obama administration, did conservative media, did libertarian media folks go balls to the wall talking about the inability of Barack Obama and his administration to handle this pandemic? No, we gave him the money. We allowed them to do what they needed to do to get the job done, and we got the hell out of the way. How? Because none of us are health experts. None of us know what the hell we are talking about when it comes to public health crises, or crises, if you will. None of us do. The least of which is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that economic genius, let alone a health and human services expert. It just drives me nuts. And then furthermore, You claim that Mike Pence is anti-science, yet you believe that only universal health care? Well, how about you believe in economics? Because the economics of universal health care would tell us that we would never be prepared for this. Why? Because you would have shut down all basic medical innovation in the private sector. There would be no private sectors setting themselves up to get a vaccine going. You would require the super slow democratic bureaucracy to come up with this. That is absolutely asinine. You are anti-economics. You are anti-science yourself there, AOC. Personally, I mean, the fact that we are seeing Donald Trump and his administration doing the things that they need to do, is it perfect? Of course, probably not. But again, I'm not a public health expert. And those people who are, like the people at the WHO, have now said it's likely that the actual death rate is between 0.1 and 1%. 0.1 to 1%. I want you to think about that. Not 3%, not 2 to 3%, not 3.4%, like you, Miss Science and AOC, like you have been claiming for a couple of weeks now. It turns out that the more information, the more testing, the more everything that's being done, it turns out that here in America, we're likely to not see this become a pandemic because we are actually getting in front of this, because we are actually taking it serious from the get-go. That's what our government should be doing, is setting up the private sector, helping them with emergency services. Not providing the service for them, but helping along the way. I'm just saying there, AOC. But folks, we have got to talk about what took place on Super Tuesday. If you listen to the media in general, the thought process for everybody was that this is Bernie's. This is going to be Bernie Sanders, even on the heels of what happened in South Carolina last Saturday after we went off the air, in which Joe Biden pretty much routed Bernie Sanders. Even in spite of all of that, the media was telling us this is Bernie's race. This is still Bernie, 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 Bernie. Meanwhile, we saw Mayor Pete drop out. We saw Clomentum being stopped. And then they endorsed Joe Biden. Now, that happened about 24 to 36 hours before Super Tuesday. So, when you read polls, you weren't being told the truth because they're usually 1 to 2, if not 3 to 4 days behind the actual voting public. Now, how would Joe Biden have been able to pull off what he pulled off, winning North Carolina by wide margins, Virginia by wide margins, winning in Minnesota, where every indication was that Bernie Sanders was going to win, winning Texas, where every indication was that the momentum was with Bernie Sanders? How did that happen so quickly? Well, some have pointed to Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar and their endorsement of Joe Biden as the reason for this. But folks, the endorsement, the physical endorsement, means jack squat when it comes to this. Instead, what was important is that the organizational side of Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar's campaigns coalesced into, basically got engulfed into Joe Biden's campaign. So, inside that final 24 hours, the get out the vote effort, the ability to use data, the ability to ramp up a full-on campaign in states like Virginia, where he spent $700,000 and had basically no campaign staff. A state like Minnesota, where that was a very similar situation. In fact, he spent less money in Minnesota than he did in Virginia, that, folks, is because of the ability to use Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar's individual campaign setup and apparatuses. Okay? The ability to use them and drive that vote. Yes, clearing the lane, so to speak, helped, but it is the stuff that went on behind the scenes that really matters in this campaign. But outside of this, I still left wondering, what in the hell is the Democratic Party doing with these two individuals as their choice in the election? You've got, on one hand, a near octogenarian in Bernie Sanders who has health issues. He's old, he's got a bad ticker, and he was a socialist. But yet you mean to tell me that we're down to that dude who less than 6 months ago had that heart attack, and Joe Biden? Joe, I can't remember who's my wife or my sister, standing right next to him? That Joe Biden? Now, I want to be clear here because I think it's vitally important, as somebody who has seen dementia inside my own family, has seen mental health issues and lots of things inside my own personal family, dealing with these types of scenarios, dealing with dementia along with Parkinson's, and just the horrific toll that it can take, not only on the individual that has this happening to him, but the families. Okay, I am very sensitive to just throwing this term out there. I don't want to make light of the subject. I don't think that is proper, but it is also not proper to sweep what is happening with Joe Biden under the rug, because this isn't, your crazy uncle living in another state, or this isn't, somebody living down the street that doesn't have power to run the world, if you will. Joe Biden is running, believe it or not for Senate, but for president. In case you were wondering there, Mr. Biden, in case you were tuning into this humble program. But the whole point here, okay, is that I wouldn't wish the type of issues and the type of things that we're seeing from Joe Biden on this campaign trail. These are not his, shucky darns gaffes. These are like literally stopping mid-sentence and not remembering where he is, what he's doing, what time of day it is. These are basic things that somebody who is of good mental faculties, whether it's dementia, whether it's something else, this is a man who cannot handle the rigors of being president. You can't handle the campaign trail. How do you handle the pressure of being president of the United States? How can we trust that you know what you're doing with the nuclear football? How do we trust that you have the mental capacities to make life and death decisions on a split second and make them well-informed decisions? That's the issue at hand here. We are literally down to two guys who are almost 80 years old on the Democratic side of the ticket. One of them has mental issues. That is clear. The other one just had a heart attack 6 months ago, and here we are. Think about that. Now, one last thought here on this topic. For me, this Super Tuesday result is really about the future of the Democratic Party. And what do I mean by that? It's that simple. Where is it headed? Is it headed down socialist hell and never coming back to its supposed roots? Or does it maintain a future that was still progressive, but not full-on socialist? We're having a battle for the soul of the Democratic Party play out right in front of us. And who's winning that battle? Well, it's not surprising that the Democratic establishment, the people that are running the Democratic Party, have managed to pull all the strings humanly possible, behind the scenes, of course, to make sure that their side, the establishment side, is winning this battle. Will it win the war? I'll get into that in a little bit here because there were some very interesting numbers that came out of Super Tuesday regarding this. But as an outside observer of the Democratic Party with no, and I mean zero dogs in this fight, there is a battle for the soul of this party. And it's very clear that Tom Perez, that Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and all of those people will do everything in their power to rig the game so that their side stays in power, that the socialist wing of their party goes away. Because ultimately, if it goes full socialist, there is no Democratic Party anymore. The Democratic Party, while we may disagree with their policy prescriptions, still played by the same game, still believed in capitalism, still believes in a lot of the things that have made America America. They may believe that the government has a bigger hand than the private sector. It's a disagreement about the proper functioning of government. It isn't a revolution of our government style that they're advocating for. It is not an abolishment of our economic principles. That has never been part of the Democratic platform. Now, you definitely have a very progressive left side of that party, but there's a difference between that and what's going on. So how did all of this happen? How was Biden able to quickly swing Super Tuesday in his favor? Well, it was also this idea that Sanders is actually betting on a losing proposition. It's not just the Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg apparatus getting behind him and pushing him through Super Tuesday. It's that Bernie Sanders bet on a losing proposition. See, because Sanders believes that he can win the nomination by simply getting the youth vote to come out, by winning it by a large margin, and then eventually pulling progressives along with him, the people that might not totally be on board with socialism, but don't see the establishment as the answer necessarily. Basically, his bet was a turnout bet. In his thought process all the way along has been, I'm just going to motivate the base, get them out to the polls in numbers that they've never seen before. He's basically playing, I'm the socialist god, hear me roar, and do as I say. See, that is the mistake that he made here. But Biden, he's always been this coalition campaigner, if you will, building support from various groups within the party, like, let's say, rich, white, suburban, woke warrior types, right? The technocratic side of the rich white elites. But before we get into break, do not forget, follow me on social media at The Coppens Show, COPPENS, COPPENS. As always, you can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/Andrew Coppens, youtube.com/Andrew Coppens. And do not forget, finally, folks, at Mojo50 Radio, you can watch this show live, you can listen to this show, you can do all sorts of wonderful things live with this show if you are podcasting. Just saying, take some time, enjoy yourselves on a Saturday afternoon with moi. On the flip side, we'll be talking about the numbers, behind the numbers, if you will, all of that wonderful goodness that took place. And of course, we'll look forward, because we need to do that. We'll also look at the Illinois congressman and the LGBT political lobby going after him, and some Babylon Bee or real news. All right, folks, welcome back from break. Yes, it is I, Andrew Coppens. This show, Critical Thinking, back for another 30 minutes with you before you head off to my millennial brother with another mother, well, from another mother, the wonderful Matthew Holloway and the HollowNet program. Please keep tuning in to Mojo 50 Radio as you go along your day. There's so many great hosts. You got Watson Prinier starting your day off. You've got the wonderful Brad Staggs hosting the Daily Mojo, Doc Thompson's Daily Mojo. Cannot believe, Doc, you've been gone for just over a year already. Then you got Jim Dawes. You've got Defenders Live. You have the Rants of Izzo, of course, and a big shout out to my fine friends over at the wonderful Defenders Live. Stephen, Dylan, thank you so much for having me on the program earlier this week. If you want to hear some of the numbers behind Super Tuesday, you could have listened then, but I'm going to give you those numbers and so much more here in the second half of this program, folks, because that's what I do here. I give you numbers and let you make a decision, at least being an informed decision. All right, so the most incredible part of what happened on Super Tuesday really involves the numbers, and it largely involves the numbers around Bernie Sanders. Because, like we talked about in the first half of the show, it was all about his idea of getting the youth vote to turn out in masse, in mass, obviously. So, shocker, considering Bernie lost bigly on Super Tuesday, young people are not turning out. Now, on its face, I will say this. The idea behind Bernie's campaign is theoretically the right idea. Why? Well, you have to know the demographics of America to understand this. And that's because there are 80 million people in the millennial generation. Okay? 80 million. They're all of voting age. There are also 90 million people in Generation Z, roughly maybe 35-40% of which are already of voting age. Add that up, you've got quite a lot of voting power. Now, baby boomers also represent 72 million people. So the generations behind them are larger than the generation that is largely turning out right now. So if you can activate and motivate the biggest number of people, theoretically, that's the right strategy. So why was this the wrong strategy? There's just no energy with this youth vote. They have seen Bernie Sanders. They've been there. They've done it. They understand who he is. They're just not motivated to get out to the polls like they were in 2016. Let's just look at the numbers from Virginia for say. Just throwing that out there. There was 1.3 million voters turning out, more than the 800,000 that turned out in 2016. So overall, there was a motivated populace. But unfortunately for Bernie Sanders, the youth vote went from 16% to 13% of the overall vote, and his vote total went down 14% within that youth vote. It was 69% if I had a bell, ding, 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 55% this time around. That loss, coupled with the fact that there were fewer, turned out to be disastrous for Bernie Sanders. You know, when you lose percentage in that population and that population decreases, it's a double whammy. And we saw it play out in North Carolina. There was a 2% decrease in the overall youth vote, with Sanders' percentage of that youth vote dropping by 12%. In South Carolina, the Saturday before Super Tuesday, the youth vote dropped by 4%, 15% to 11%. Sanders, well, it turns out he lost, I believe, 11% of that voter percentage within the youth vote. You're seeing a very similar pattern playing out, aren't you? In Tennessee, 11% of those that vote this time around versus 15% in 2016 of that youth vote, that 18 to 29 vote. Okay? But here's the issue. In Tennessee, you saw a little bit of a different scenario at play. It still didn't play out the way that Bernie would have liked it to in Tennessee, but you saw a 2% increase in his voting support with the youth in that state. It went up, but a 4% drop in the overall group. There just were not enough people showing up to vote for Bernie Sanders in the state of Tennessee. In Virginia, the young voters comprised just 13% of Tuesday's vote compared to 16% in 2016, with an 11% drop in his voter percentage within that group. You see the problem playing out. Now, there was one particular outlier that I think is interesting here. Alabama. He saw a massive increase in his voting percentage within the youth. It went from 40 to 60% for Sanders. But here's the problem. 14% in 2016 were the youth vote. It's now 10%. So even in places where people were much more motivated to vote for him, it didn't matter because there were far fewer of them in totality. Congratulations, you got 60% of, 10%? Instead of 40% of 14? Your numbers at 40% of 14 are almost as equal, if not more than your 60% at 10%. Now, there's another state that really, I think, threw people for a loop, and that was Texas. Because I really want to break this down, because it shows the issue that faces the country now and as we look forward. And then, in this case, it nearly played into Bernie's advantage. But Biden was able to win because he got the old black vote and got them to turn out. He literally flipped Bernie Sanders' script. He literally turned it on its head. So Biden got that old black vote to come out. What you need to know is that they represented 15% of the overall vote in Texas. The 45 to 64 age range, well, that broke 68% to Joe Biden. Just 12% to Sanders and another 12% to Mike Bloomberg. The 65 plus black vote went 62 to 7%. 62% for Biden, 7% for Bernie Sanders, and then Bloomberg with 26% of that vote. Now, what about the youth, right? Well, they went more socialist, but they just were 5% of the overall vote. Sanders won by just 15%. You don't see this massive break like you did in the older population, which came in at 15%. 5% to 15%. 5 times 3 is 15, right? There you go. You got a tripling of the voter percentage, and they broke hardcore for Biden. That is how he won. But if we want to look forward, which I really want to do, because I'm not even talking about looking forward to the general election, okay? I'm talking about the next election, and the election after that, and the election after that. But we also have to talk about the Latino population in the state of Texas. We all know that it's a booming Latino population and all of the demographic stuff, right? But we have to know that combined with the term liberation theology. It is a socialist construct that is built inside the Catholic Church, largely within the Latino population of Central and South America. It's basically from cradle to grave indoctrination going on every level, whether it's in the church, whether it's in the home or the school. This type of theology, I use the term very loosely, is very powerful. And when we talk about changing the culture, which is the theme of this show in 2020, this is partly what I'm talking about. We have to uproot. We have to completely dig out from underneath all of the roots of socialism. This is a massive part of the picture. And it's not going to be easy. I mean, hell, the head of the Catholic Church, the Pope Francis, is a practitioner of liberation theology. But we've got to deal with it. We've got to root it out. We've got to dig it up. We've got to grind the roots. And why do I say this? Well, check this out. 66% of the Latino population, 18 to 29 in age, 66% of them voted for Sanders. 55% of Latinos that were 30 to 44 voted for Sanders. Basically, 30% or more of the Latinos over the age of 45 also supported Sanders. Now, combined, the Latino population made up just over 33% of the total vote in Texas. But as the older generation begins to age out and, all the things that go on here, the younger groups, the groups that went hardcore for Bernie Sanders, their numbers are likely to increase. So you have to ask yourself, how do you combat this? Because what you're seeing is a group that's largely okay with socialism. You have to start fighting this fight, and it may be too late to fight this fight. That's the issue at hand here as we go forward to 2024. If we cannot kill it now, if we cannot kill it dead right now, as a larger culture, if we cannot say no to socialism, we are effed. We are screwed. And the other thing is, it won't be Bernie Sanders at the top of this socialist idea anymore going forward. You're going to have the Rashida Tlaibs, the AOCs, the Ilhan Omars, and as much as you and I can't stand those individuals, they have been propped up by the media hardcore. Ilhan Omar has been able to get away with blatant anti-Semitism. Rashida Tlaib, blatant anti-Semitism. AOC, blatant anti-Semitism. Ilhan Omar's been able to get away with crazy-ass marriage situations, never having to answer for them. Never. So, how do you fight this? You have to fight this at the beginning. You've got to say no to liberation theology, no to teaching this stuff. It is ingrained into a core principle of the Latino communities in America, especially those that are from South America and Central America. Not so much in Mexico, but still in Mexico, you look at their government, you look at the things that are going on there, it's largely socialist. These ideas have been ingrained into the populations that are coming into America. They're also ingrained largely into the youth. So the question going forward is, that group, right, that Latino population that represents nearly 33% of the overall vote, if that group turns on its head and stops voting socialist, we have a shot. If only half turn away from it as they get older, or a quarter, maybe we have a shot. But that's asking a lot, and that's going to take a lot of cultural change. Change within the church institutions, change within community organizations. It is a cultural uprooting that needs to happen in a major, major way. So, all of this means that, for me, the 2020 election is likely going to be Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. One, a political outsider, if you will. The other doesn't know where he is, what day it is, what time it is, who his wife is, who his sister is, who his son is, what job his son has. It is going to be bat nuts crazy because there's really no path forward for Bernie Sanders. Think about this. Nearly every state with big delegate counts is in Biden's territory. You've got New York, that's Biden. Pennsylvania, Biden. Florida, definitely Biden. Thanks to Bernie for that Fidel Castro debacle. You got New Jersey, you've got Illinois. Those are Biden, Biden, Biden all the way. All I have to do is look at how this situation happened in 2016 to know it. And Now you've got the mayor, you've got big-time politicians here in Chicago all endorsing Joe Biden ahead of our primary in this state. Yeah, Sanders is screwed. They put the screws to him on Super Tuesday. They just did it behind the scenes this time. All right, so enough numbers. Let's go on and play the game that is sweeping across the Mojo 50 radio network. It's my game. It's Babylon Bee or Real News time. You know the drill. I give you the headline. I give you the story, a little bit of the story, a few paragraphs at most. You decide, is it Babylon Bee or Real News? Because frankly, folks, that's how crazy the news is today. So this week's headline: Chicago defends decision not to cooperate with ICE even after a man is accused of sexually assaulting a child in a McDonald's bathroom. The story: the man accused of sexually assaulting a 3-year-old girl inside a bathroom of McDonald's flagship restaurant in the River North community has previously been deported, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency said. Chicago officials responded Friday, standing by their decision not to cooperate with ICE on immigration-related business. Christopher Puente, 34, of Chicago, is currently being held without bail after being charged with predatory criminal sexual assault in connection with an alleged attack on a child in the former Rock and Roll McDonald's on Clark Street earlier this month. Babylon Bee or Real News? You know the drill. If you're watching along or listening live, hit me up on Twitter or leave a comment here on the video and you can win some show swag that's coming my way. So, you have got until the count of 5, not to get your yellow ugly carcass, thank you, Home Alone, but you got to the count of 5 to get your guess in. Is this real news or satire? 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. The verdict: real news. This story comes to us courtesy of Chicago's ABC affiliate. And the details of the attack are sickening, folks. So Christopher Puente, is accused of sexually assaulting a 3-year-old girl while her father was helping his other child, his son, go to the bathroom inside the the former Rock and Roll McDonald's. It's a landmark here in Chicago. They changed it up a little bit in the last couple of years, but it is an absolute landmark. Everybody knows where this place is, okay? But the details of this attack are just sickening here, okay? This sick man attacked this little girl by grabbing her away from her dad while he was helping, locking her in a stall with him. Now, I know this is going to be a little bit graphic, so if you've got children, if you got a squeamish stomach, I'm going to give you a couple of seconds. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so here's the deal from the ABC 7 News story. Quote, prosecutors said the girl's father heard his daughter's cries and desperately tried to open the locked stall. He could see her feet dangling off the ground, so he grabbed her legs and pulled her out from under the stall. He ran out of the bathroom with her, leaving Puente inside the bathroom. Here's the shocking bit of information beyond the absolute sickening attack on a 3-year-old. Okay? This man is an illegal immigrant, but not just any illegal immigrant, one with a criminal record that goes back 20 years here in the United States. His rap sheet includes convictions for burglary, forgery, trespassing, domestic battery, and other related offenses. This man was deported in December of 2014, managing to come back to the border 5 freaking days later, claiming that he had a birth certificate to prove that he was a citizen here in America. Luckily, he was charged with false citizenship, right? But here's the other twist. It took 3 years for the government to ban him in absentia. And of course, during that 3-year time, they didn't just lock his rear end up. They didn't just put him into a deportation jail or anything like that. They just released him right into the interior of the United States of America. 3 years later, he never, here's a shocker, showed up for that hearing. And what does Chicago do? They come out and say that they're proud of their lack of willingness to help ICE, even in the face of this attack. A 3-year-old, some of the most innocent individuals in our community. Mayor Lori Lightfoot and top police brass said the following in a press conference on this very matter. Quote, "The Chicago Police Department remains committed to protecting all Chicago residents regardless of their immigration status," Chicago police said in a statement. "Our pledge to restrict ICE access to our information systems and our refusal to cooperate with ICE immigration enforcement measures has not changed." Lightfoot said, if ICE is complaining, they should look at doing their job better. They're critical because we have said very clearly we are a welcoming city, a sanctuary city. Chicago Police Department will not cooperate with ICE on any immigration-related business, and that's affected their ability to conduct immigration raids across the city. But that's exactly our intention. We have to make sure that our police department is seen as a legitimate force in all of our communities. A legitimate force. What other legitimate outcome? What other legitimate use of police resources could there possibly be than protecting the most innocent freaking lives in our community? What possible reason could you actually advocate for keeping this man in our freaking city? This is infuriating beyond belief. You can say that you don't want the normal, average, everyday person. But when you know that this particular individual is being charged with a sexual assault of a minor, you lose the right to that protection. I don't agree with the sanctuary status in this city at all. But at a minimum, if you're going to have it, this should be something that negates that policy. No quarter for these types of people. This is one of thousands of stories that we've seen throughout the country. This is sick. This man has a rap sheet of 20 years. It's a prime example of how backwards and unworkable our immigration policy really is in general. But specifically, how does Chicago sit there as a bunch of leaders and say that they're proud of this situation? You're proud of allowing a predator to roam your streets? You knowingly allowed this individual on your streets? You know that you're not going to cooperate with this individual? As far as I'm concerned, the police department should have said, screw you. We're just handing you right over to ICE. He's got a ban in absentia. This is a situation where they should have known this piece of information, gone to ICE, and said, get him the hell off of our streets. We don't want this type of people or this type of a person living here in Chicago. Look, I do not care about your thoughts on the border wall, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, whether you believe in open borders or whatever. Okay? This is not about that. This is about enforcing the simplest of concepts. And yet we can't even figure out that this is a bad thing for our overall community. This is bad for the Latino community. This is bad for everybody. There's nothing positive about this. Yet Lightfoot, the interim police chief here, all about it. Out of your ever-loving minds. How this system failed us like this is beyond belief. It's simple. Get more immigration judges. Get speedy trials for this type of a situation, fair adjudication of those cases, and most importantly, you do not pass go, you do not get beyond our detention centers, you do not get into the interior until these cases have been adjudicated. It's really that simple. How is this blows my mind. But speaking of that, another example of blowing my mind happened here in Illinois. Aaron Schock. He was a former congressman, and he was a former congressman largely because he was embroiled in a scandal about campaign use of money and all sorts of really Illinois type corruption. So turns out this man is gay. Why does this matter? Well, it doesn't really matter, except for when you know this bit of information. It turns out that he's not a friend of the LGBT community, even though he's gay. In the story from the Chicago Tribune, he says he also confronts what he has been cautioned may be the reaction of those in the LGBTQ community who may wonder why he didn't do more to support his own community while he held office. A Washington Post column by Stephen Petro addressed the issue, writing, quote, "Make no mistake, Schock, regardless of his sexual orientation, is no friend to the LGBTQ community." What? How is that possible? Oh, that's because he steadfastly opposed marriage equality and has voted against the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, hate crime legislation, and LGBT employment non-discrimination. The Human Rights Campaign has awarded the congressman a rating of 0, its lowest for each of his congressional terms. Now, Schock does say that if he were in Congress today, he would support those rights in every way that he could. But why I bring this up is because this is prime exhibit A, if you will, of what I've been talking about for years on Twitter and within my circles of friends and anybody who wants to listen. I got no problem if you're gay. I don't care if you're gay. I don't care what you orientate towards sexually. Don't really care. It's not my place to judge. It's God's place to judge that. But at the same point in time, I have been saying that this has nothing to do with sexual orientation. It has to do with political orientation. If Aaron Schock was a Democrat prior to this coming out situation, there would be 1, no mention of his voting record. 2, there would be nobody writing these types of things, even if he was a fiscal conservative or, leaning to the moderate side of the Democratic Party. Even if he was socially conservative before coming out gay. He has a D after his name, not an R. But when you've got an R, you are automatically an enemy of the LGBTQ community, even though you're a member of that very community. Could it possibly be that this is all about politics and activism rather than sexual orientation all along? That is the key here. That is the truth here. On that wonderful, ridiculous note, it's time for me to say tschüss, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye. We'll talk to you next week. Do not forget my millennial brother from another mother, Matthew Holloway, and the HollowNet coming up next. Please hit up that YouTube page, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can see my work from this show and my work throughout the week. I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and until next week, Matthew 5:44.